Hi, I'm Rob Patz.
And I'm Kristen Stanton.
And this is the Rob and Kristen Show. Welcome to another edition of the Rob and Kristen Show, and it's good to be here. It is like sweltering hot.
I don't know where you're watching from, but it is hot here in Ohio.
It is hot. It is summer. It is time for us to be out in what we like to call Studio C, which is outdoors. We love that. And, I want to ask you something.
Okay.
And I always wonder about this because I find it really interesting. Of course, being a coffee drinker, I drink hot coffee even in the summer. Do you do that or do you switch? Now,
except for when we're outside walking around.
Right.
Then he'll get iced coffee.
I'll get iced coffee or cold brew. But which are you one of those people that switches, like when it becomes spring, you switch to iced coffee or cold coffees of some cold brew or whatever? I don't know. I just, it's something I find very interesting. And it also leads us to one of the great sponsors we have on the Rob and Kristen Show, and that is 7 Weeks Coffee. 7 Weeks Coffee has been fantastic. I got an email again this week about the impact that our viewers are having by purchasing the coffee. And it is so humbling to see. It is a great cause. And of course, tell them a little bit about what they do.
Well, 7 Weeks Coffee helps save the lives of unborn children. And Rob, I received an email this week and said, hey, your purchase helped save this life. And it told the story about a young mom who had planned on aborting her baby. And through the assistance of an organization that 7 Weeks supports, she decided to have the baby, and she was excited to take this baby in to show the staff of this agency. It was very, very neat story, and it's really awesome to know that we had a part of that because we purchased 7 Weeks Coffee.
Yep, and thank you so much for supporting 7 Weeks Coffee. Go to 7weekscoffee.com. Use the promo code ATV10 when you check out. They have a special discount for you, and I have to tell you, today's show, I am super excited. And also, though, at the same time, I want to, at least for my opinion, this is probably one of the most impactful shows that we have done.
We like to do a lot of things where we're joking around and having fun. But in this particular show, this is really deep. And it's impactful and meaningful in just an extraordinary way. If you've ever been hurt, dealt with emotional or physical need for a healing, this is a show for you.
I say it every time, but one of my favorite parts.
Yes, you do say this every single time.
Every time. It's, I think, people say variety is the spice of life, and I'm Scandinavian, so we don't really like spice. So I'm coming to the conclusion that's why I say the same thing, because it feels comfortable. It feels like a warm piece of butter on top of some bread.
Leave it to you to make a food analogy.
Oh, it is. I love these because I love the stories behind the books. And that to me is always interesting. As we often say, I don't read, but I enjoy listening to and talking to authors about their life, and it really brings to life the book that they're doing.
Yeah, and the author that we're having on today, she's not just an author, she's a therapist, and she really has an amazing story and really has something to say about healing and how God has healed her through just a set of circumstances. I mean, God can do anything, whether it's a physical healing or emotional healing. And some of the worst and the deepest scars that we can have are those emotional wounds. And a lot of people don't really ever feel like they can get through some of those things. But God can
Yep.
take you through all of those things. And that's what our guest here today is going to tell us a
You
little bit about.
I think if somebody is out there watching, maybe they've got somebody that is struggling with an emotional situation right now, this would be a fantastic show. Grab your phone, text them, say, hey, tune into Abundant TV right now, because this could very well be a life-changing interview.
And it's Rob, unfortunately, it's not something that you get to make jokes through and laugh through. I know that how much you like doing that,
Well,
but
no, you've noticed I've been very serious other than the butter at the start. I just it is really neat. And you know what? I didn't ask her how to say her last name, so I'm going to just do it very much safe and just call her Kimberly, kind of like, Prince and Madonna and those people. But Kimberly, great to have you. And I am currently having envy over your white mic. I have never seen a white, and I'm a big radio person. I've got another, tell you how much I love microphones. I actually have two that I could touch right here. And that is super cool. It is. How do you say your last name?
Har, like Hardy, har, har.
Hardy Har Har. See, she's funny. I knew I was supposed to be serious, but she was funny right off the bat. So, oh, it is good to have you on the Rob and Kristen Show. And thank you. Before we start, because we got a chance always to talk to our guests off camera first. Thank you for sharing your heart, and really, this is going to be an impactful show. I truly believe it. We are super excited, and uh, I want to thank you for being open to talk about the subject we're going to talk about today.
Thank you so much for having me.
so Kimberly, you have a new book that's out. It was out in beginning of June. It's
Mhm.
called Healing from Life's Deepest Hurts. And it sounds like such a very, very deep book. And it comes from a place of personal history, right?
It does. I went
So
through my own I went through my own stuff to put in the book.
So tell us a little bit about your story and what made you decide to write a book?
Sure. Well, let me maybe answer the question first about why I wrote a book. And that is because in 2017, I walked through a trauma and it was all over the news, and the world knew that here was a woman that had been hurt. And I decided that I didn't want that to be the end of the story. So I decided to write a book that said, yes, here was a woman that was hurt, but she ran to Jesus, and this is a woman that was also healed. And so I walk through, and in 2017, and let me maybe back up for a minute. In 2013, I made the hardest decision of my life, and I filed for divorce from my first husband. There have been patterns of infidelity, and I decided that I just could no longer be in this relationship, but I determined I would be single for 4 years while I raised our youngest children, got them out of high school, and kind of launched them onto college. And so in 2017, I woke up and something inside me said, this is the year you're going to be married again. And so I was 50 years old, and I thought, okay, where does a 50-year-old even begin to put yourself out there, to begin to start dating again? And so I worked up my courage and I joined 5 dating sites.
Oh,
And
wow.
so
You're
I decided
brave.
if I was going to do it, I was really going to do it. And so on my 14th first date, I was actually ready to hang it up because it is not for the weak of heart. And on April Fool's Day, I met a man. And we both knew almost immediately that this was just such a good connection, a good fit. And we dated each other almost every night for a month.
Oh,
And
wow.
2 weeks into it, I always laugh at this part. 2 weeks into it, his name was Andrew. He looked down at me and he said, I've asked Google how long I need to know somebody before I know I'm in love, because Andrew was an engineer
Mhm.
and very wanted statistics and details and data. And so he said, I want to marry you. So we both knew that we were going to get married. In the meantime, my ex-husband called me and he said he wanted to visit with me. He wanted to talk about our children, and that was not unusual. We had a friendly divorce. So one evening after work, I went by his apartment and he started talking about wanting to get back together with me. And I made the comment, I said, I have started dating somebody seriously. I've moved on. You need to as well.
Mm.
And he made a comment. He said, maybe I'm just going to need to go talk to that man. And it didn't make sense to me because I had not talked to him about it, but I would later learn that my ex-husband had actually been stalking me and following me.
Oh my
S-
goodness.
So on my way, when I left my ex-husband's apartment, I called Andrew and I said, "Can I stop by your house just for a minute?" Because I wanted to warn him. And I
Mhm.
said, "I'm so sorry. My ex-husband says he's going to come talk to you. He may, make up some lies." I said, "But Andrew, would you fight for me?" And he looked down at me and he said, "Of course I would." He said, "You're worth it." And
Mhm.
little did I know, within 24 hours, Andrew would not just be fighting for me, but he would be fighting for his life. S-
Wow.
So I went home and I went to bed, but something stirred in me and it said, "Get up and lock your bedroom door." It's not something I normally did, but I got up, I locked my bedroom door, and I went to sleep. And at 2:30 in the morning, I woke up to the sound of my bedroom door crashing down off the hinges. My ex-husband had broken into my home. He had a gun, he was intoxicated, and for the next 4 hours I was assaulted.
Oh,
After the assault, he kidnapped me, and he said that as punishment for ruining his life, he was going to make me watch him murder the man I had just started dating.
oh my goodness.
So I went with him. I was at gunpoint. I went to Andrew's house. And as my ex husband was getting out of the vehicle, he turned to me and he said, "Now you go do whatever you need to do." And he left the keys in the ignition. But I saw him get the gun, I saw him get the bullets, and I heard 3 gunshots as he was at Andrew's front door. So I knew there was no way Andrew was going to survive this. I made an escape, and kind of long story short, I ended up in the emergency room, and I had met one of Andrew's children before. They were all adult children, but he called my phone and he said, "We wish your mom well," because my daughter answered it. He said, "But they just need to go their separate ways." And I would learn that Andrew had been shot 10 times.
Oh my goodness.
From there, I didn't hear from Andrew for another 4 to 6 weeks because, it was a crime. He was under an assumed name in the hospital. There was multiple surgeries. And so I went to my uncle and aunt's house, and they had a beautiful pergola in their backyard. They gifted me their home for the summer because they were going to Canada. And I just knew when I saw outdoors, I said, I knew this is where my healing was going to begin. And so, little by little, in the beginning, I just laid on my face, pouring out my heart to the Lord, weeping and crying and asking Him to fill me up because I was so broken. And that's kind of where my healing began.
So you had to have been feeling not just fear during this time because of all of the things that your ex-husband had done. I know that if I had been in your position, I would have been feeling probably even fear for myself. But
Mhm.
you don't know at this point you probably didn't know what he was capable of before this
This
happened.
was this was all a surprise to me, and it felt like it was a bad dream I was gonna wake up from. I felt numb, and there was a lot of fear, but, Kristen, at one point, after everything had happened in those 4 hours, I was laying on my bed, and I noticed I sensed a presence in the room, and this presence, it was a familiar presence, but it felt like it was a sad presence. And all I can say is I just knew in my heart it was the presence of God. It was like the Lord was standing right beside me, putting his hand in mine. And I knew at that point, I didn't know if I'd live or die, but I knew that if I died, I wouldn't have been alone. And it
Mhm,
was at that point that that fear left me.
mhm. So how did you deal with the fear after this is all said and done, and you knew that you were sitting in this pergola and you were starting to heal? You knew that this was going to be the
Mhm,
beginning of your healing. How did you start to heal? How did you deal with the trauma that you had just been through? Not just the
mhm.
fear and the anxiety, but
Sure.
also with this loss of this person,
Mhm,
or at least the disconnect from this person that you had spent a lot of
mhm.
time with and that you knew that you loved.
That's right. In the beginning, like I said, everything felt like a bad dream, and I was very numb. And when something really bad happens like that, it is a very slow process because my first few days to weeks, I would just lay on the cement floor and I would just weep. And I remember my first prayer to the Lord was, I know that there's a scripture in Zephaniah that says you sing over us. And I said, God, I have no words. I'm frustrated. I'm angry. I feel abandoned. Why didn't you stop it? And I said, but I'm asking you to sing life back into my body. And so little by little, those first few weeks, I mean, it was the healing looked like getting outside, making myself get out of bed. It made myself taking care of my physical body. And there were so many emotions. There was anger, there was fear, there was resentment, there was numb. I mean, it all hit. And part of that was I began to heal when I got honest with the Lord. And what
Mhm.
happened is in the beginning, of course, it's normal when you go through something where you feel very out of control. It's human nature that we want to control. So I got on the phone to all my friends, and I said, "Okay, I need you to pray. Get me on every prayer chain. This is what you need to pray, how you need to pray." And I was telling the Lord, "Lord, this is what you need to do, how you need to do it, when you need to do it. Oh, but I trust you." And my healing began when I got real, and I said, "God, I don't trust you. I'm scared to trust you. I'm scared to trust you with my dreams. I'm scared to trust you." But there was a moment where I said, "I'm going to choose to trust you. It's not on my feelings." And so I got up, and the Bible talks about a sacrifice of praise.
Mhm.
And I think a sacrifice of praise is when you can lift your hands when your heart is heavy. And I said, "Lord, I don't feel like it, but I'm going to say it until my heart believes it. And that is, I choose to trust you." And it was, I had to walk through forgiveness. I had to walk through, so many things, and I right away obviously put myself in therapy, because I'm a therapist, and I know I wanted somebody to walk beside me in this. But God's the healer, therapy is the tool. It's one tool, and it was little by little, like an onion, the healing began.
Mhm. So at what point did you start working on a book? You had this idea,
Mhm,
you didn't want this to be the only thing people knew about
mhm.
you and about the situation. So at what point did you start working on the book and this concept for the book?
You know what's funny is I actually knew I was gonna write a book 18 years ago. I There was something in me that said, "I'm gonna write a book," and I knew it was gonna be about trust. I just thought it was going to be about how you trust in a marriage again after infidelity, and it ended up more being a book about trusting the Lord. But I even went to Barnes& and Noble 18 years ago, and I found a book by a woman that had the same last name as me, and I bought 2 of her books. I put them on my shelf so I would know what my name looked like on the spine of a book. And so when I went through all of this, I knew someday there would be a book that came from this. I began journaling, and I think that that's really how it began. Is I began to journal, and as it's now been 8 years, and so it was time. I could write from my healing instead of writing from my pain.
So tell us a little bit about the book.
Yeah, the book is divided into 2 sections. The first one is, I take it and it's based on Ecclesiastes, where it talks about there's a time and season for everything. And, for me as a therapist, it was a really hard decision to write a book because we're used to holding everybody else's stories, but not telling our own. And so I decided that women especially needed to hear from another woman that could say, "Me too, I get it. I've hurt too." So I've based it on Ecclesiastes, and it talks about there's a time to grieve, a time to mourn, but I wanted people to know there's also a time to celebrate and rejoice, and a time to dance again and laugh again. I didn't want people to be stuck in their pain. And so the first part of the book, I actually walk through my story. I tie the reader into it and ask them, "Okay, this was part of my story. Now let's bring you into this. What does this look like in your life?" And then the second half is called Tools for Growth and Healing. And there are 10 therapeutic tools that not only have I used with my own clients in my practice, but I use these myself. And this is everything from the power of friendship and community, because we tend to want to isolate when bad things happen. There's the power of journaling, the power of gratitude, the power of knowing God's word and praying God's word over us. There's the power of self care. So they're very practical, but they walk a reader through healing steps for themselves.
So for somebody who may be watching right now that just feels that deep emotional trauma from something that they've been through, what is one piece of advice that you could give to them right now without knowing any of their story?
Um,
What's the one thing that you would say to
yeah.
them right now?
Yeah, yeah. I would say hold on. I would say that even though you may think your story is too broken or nothing good can come of your story, it is holding on and saying, just take the next right step. Healing begins slowly. It begins with just the next right step. Don't worry about the whole picture. And that next right step might be, going and talking to a trusted pastor or inviting a trusted friend or professional licensed therapist. It may be I'm getting out of bed when I don't feel like it. I'm going and sitting in the sunlight. That's beginning of healing. It can be slow, but I would say that there's no cookie cutter healing, and you heal in your own time, your own pace. But the thing is, just make a choice that you're going to heal.
Mhm. Romans 8:28 says that God can take all things and work them together for our good,
Mhm.
and all means everything. It's
That's
not
right.
just the good things, it's not the things that are just peripheral. Even the deepest of the trauma, God
Mhm.
knows where you are, so if you're walking through something right now, know that God is there with you,
Mhm.
even when it doesn't feel like it, know that He is there.
Yeah.
He has a purpose for everything that you're going through, and like Kimberly said, you just have to trust him. You can, and I believe, Kimberly, that's why the
Mhm.
Bible tells us to lean not on our own
Right.
understanding, because our own understanding often fails us. You and I are both professionals,
Mhm.
and we rely upon the things that we've learned and from books and experience,
Mhm.
and in order to be able to walk people through things. But at the end of the day, when you're talking about something that you've been through in your own life,
Mhm.
we can know all of the things in our head, but our mind will fail us time and time again. God is the one that we have to lean on. So if you are going through something, know that God is right there. Pick up this book that Kimberly has just poured her heart into, because this is something that you need to read. Um, I'm excited to read it, Kimberly, because I don't have it yet, but I'm excited to read it. It was just out, I think, June 5th, and
Mhm.
it is called Healing from Life's Deepest Hurts. And it's just one of those things, and I tell our audience all of the time, that's my thing, is God has a plan for you. And so just
Mhm.
don't forget, in the middle of those things that you're walking through, whatever it might be, that God still has a plan. Even when things feel like they're spiraling out of control, God still knows where you are.
Right.
He still has a plan for you. So,
Trauma and hard things can rewrite our story, but it doesn't have to steal the end of our story.
yeah.
Our story is not over.
Yeah. We're not defined by our circumstances. We're not defined by our life history. We're not defined by where we are in the moment. We're defined by who God says we are. And I
Mhm.
feel like so often people define themselves by their circumstances instead of knowing what God says about us.
Mhm.
So,
It's really that going from the why me to the what now. It's,
Oh, I
you
love
know,
that.
yeah.
when I was going through the whole thing, I had to go down to the Victim Witness Center, and I had to sign in every time because it was a crime, and there was a sign that said, "Victim sign here." And when I saw that, I knew in my heart I was a victim that day. I was a victim in that moment, but I wasn't going to let that be my label. I had
Mhm.
been victimized. But being victimized is different than staying in that victim. So go from that why me to what now?
That's
I love
awesome.
because it really there are a lot of people suffer from the fact that
Mhm,
they once they're labeled something, they
mhm,
never leave that label,
mhm,
you know, and I love that. What tell people one thing that maybe they're in that moment right now where they live the victim mentality. What is one thing
mhm.
they can start doing in their life to start changing that thought process?
Sure. I think one of the most important things, there's actually 2 things. One is bring your honest feelings and thoughts and questions and be honest with the Lord because, God gave us every emotion. It's okay to be angry. It's okay to be sad and disappointed, and when you can bring that to the Lord, he does not chastise you and tell you, "Well, you shouldn't be angry. Well, you're not thankful." It's bring those honest prayers just like David did in Psalms. David lamented and he said, God, I feel like you've abandoned me. Where are you? But he would always end it with, but bless the Lord, oh my soul, but you are worthy. And so it's taking our feelings and feel our feelings, but know that our feelings aren't necessarily the truth. The second thing is really work on forgiveness. Because when you go through something really hard, there's a question of who do you need to forgive? Sometimes it's actually God. And God doesn't need our forgiveness, but sometimes we need to forgive him and release him from the expectations that we put on him. Because we say, I expect you to show up this way, and we need to release that. We need to forgive ourselves. But then it's really important to begin to forgive other people. Because when you get that anger and unforgiveness, I like to say it's like an umbilical cord. With a baby, an umbilical cord is meant to bring nutrients and life and to grow. But anger and unforgiveness, it's like it sucks the life out of you, and it keeps you in a place, it keeps you connected to the events that happened. And only you can make that choice to cut that umbilical cord. So in the beginning, if you don't want to forgive, it's just saying, Lord, help me even want to forgive, because right now I don't want to forgive.
That was an incredibly impactful interview.
It really was. Kimberly just really opened up, and some of it was off camera, and she told us a little bit more of her story. But we hope that with that interview, if you're dealing with hurt of any kind, that you know that there is healing in the middle of that. And I think it's super important for all of us to remember, Rob, and a lot of the things that we talked about in the interview, but also what the Bible says. Jesus came to be the healer, and he is the healer. It's not a healer someday. It's the healer for whatever you're going through right now. God knows where you are, and he still has a plan. She could have walked away, and like she said, I could have been a victim, but I was victimized. I was not a victim forever. We're a victim sometimes of our circumstances, but that does not mean that is the label that we carry, because God has already described us as a lot of other things, and victim is not one of them. Victor, yes.
I love that she said she didn't accept that.
Yes.
That she was a victim. And
Yes.
I loved that. She is an incredible woman. Check out her book, which the QR code was during the show. You can check that out, or you can find us on social media and check it out there. Man, it was incredible. Listen, if you're going through something, find someone to talk to. And if you need someone to talk to, you can email us, find us on social media. We would love to talk to you. And we want to encourage you to go out and live an abundant life.